and welcome to our podcast, Adelaide Ann Procter, Victorian Poetry, Faith and Fundraising. I'm Elizabeth Ludlow and I work at Anglia Ruskin University in Cambridge in the UK.
And I'm Amanda Vernon and I work at the University of Tübingen in Germany. Adelaide Ann Procter was born on October 30th, 1825. And the fact that we are celebrating her bicentenary this year prompted the idea to produce a short podcast series in order to introduce her to a broader audience and reflect a little bit on what she might have to offer us today. In this episode, we'll give a taster of what's to come in the 4 episodes that follow this, where we talk to Procter experts and find out about the ongoing work of the Providence Road charity, with which Procter was involved in the early 1860s. We'll also say a little bit more about our own encounters with Procter and introduce you to 2 of Procter's most well-known poems, A Lost Chord and A Legend of Provence. Procter is unfortunately not as well known as we like and we think she deserves to be. She was a prolific poet and, as we discussed throughout this series, a feminist who promoted better education and opportunities for women. She was hugely popular in her own time. Apart from Tennyson, she was the best-selling poet of the 19th century. She was a favorite of Queen Victoria and also became Dickens's most published poet in his periodical Household Words. I'm wondering, Lizzie, when did you first come across Procter?
It was when I was doing my PhD, which was not quite 20 years ago now. I was doing my PhD on Christina Rossetti. And Christina Rossetti knew Procter. They were both part of the Portfolio Club, which was a group of women poets and writers who would share work with each other, often over correspondence, and discuss it in their letters. I was really interested in Procter when I first came across her, particularly because of her feminist activism, and was really interested in the work of the group with which she was involved, the Langham Place Circle, which was an organised group of Victorian feminists named after the place. They had offices in London. I came across her at the same time as Emma Mason was writing about her in her book on women poets of the 19th century. That came out in 2006, and a third of it is about Procter. So I definitely recommend that as a book to go to about Procter. And more recently, I've written about Procter myself in my latest book on prayer and embodiment in 19th century women's writing. I think particularly about A Legend of Provence and Procter's deep theological voice that runs through that poem and others.
And I just will take the opportunity to plug Lizzie's book because it is fantastic. She didn't know I was going to say that, but go and run and buy it because it's a really wonderful book published by Bloomsbury.
Oh, thanks, Amanda. So when did you come across Procter?
I think I came across her through you. I kind of knew vaguely about her, but I had heard about her from you. And then actually at the end of last year, I was at Yale University for a conference and I had a chance to go and dig around a little bit at the Beinecke Library. And so I was looking at the George MacDonald collection, of course, as I do. And there was a whole folder of calling cards from people who had visited the MacDonald family. And Procter's card was there. And I hadn't realized that they knew each other. So that prompted some interest for me about what their relationship was, about her editorial work, her relationship with other literary figures in the 19th century.
Yeah, she seemed to know everybody. I think Bessie Rayner Parkes, in writing about Procter, said anybody and everybody was coming in and out of their house in London. And I found it really interesting reading the anecdote that Jill Gregory's got in her 1998 biography of Procter, where she talks about how Procter's parents were initially thought about as the authors of Jane Eyre. They were suspected to be Currer Bell when it first came out.
Oh, interesting.
They knew everybody. It was dedicated to Thackeray, who they knew. And so Procter knew everybody. And she'd actually written to MacDonald and Trollope and Tennyson and Gaskell to write for Victoria Regia in 1861. So this was a publication that Procter edited to showcase the work of female compositors at the Victoria Press, which was linked to the Langham Place Circle and English Women's Journal, with which she was involved in, a book that she spent a long time editing. But in the letters, you can see how she is so well networked and invited all these different authors to write for her. And she's also got a poem. She kind of responds to one of MacDonald's novels, doesn't she, Amanda?
Yeah, so she's got this poem Fantasties, which is the title of one of MacDonald's first published works, his first fantasy novel. And it's part of a poem sequence entitled Borrowed Thoughts, which appears in her second volume of Legends and Lyrics. And yeah, you can definitely see the kind of borrowed thought element as she's kind of picking up on some of the ideas in MacDonald's fantasy novel and doing her own thing in the poem. So I was delighted to find that. And then also MacDonald, of course, as you said, wrote a poem for her volume, Victoria Rajaya, and it's called The Golden Key. And he later kind of expands on this theme that he writes about in that poem in one of his fairy tales. So I need to do some more digging about the two of them because I find the connections to be fascinating. I love seeing how authors are responding to each other in their work. I'm interested in Procter's relationship to Dickens, who was a family friend and wrote an introduction to the Legends and Lyrics series when they were put together in one volume after Procter died.
Yeah, so Dickens, in this introduction to the series, writes mostly about Procter's childhood. He was good friends with Procter's parents, particularly her father, Brian Procter, who wrote under the pen name Barry Cornwall for Household Words. When Dickens came to visit the Procter household to meet with Procter's parents, he talked about seeing Procter and all of her younger siblings. And he says that he didn't realise at the time that the young Adelaide was actually the author of several poems for Household Words because she'd been using a pen name, Miss Berwick, when she'd been writing to Household Words. He hadn't associated the two in his mind for a while. He reflects on Adelaide's childhood in rather sentimentalised and fragile terms, and terms I think have stuck in Procter criticism and scholarship since. There's an emphasis on the smallness of her work, person, writing, and the little books that she was reading, the littleness of her.
Yeah, and he talks a lot about her quickness in picking up languages, several languages, and her musical abilities. I was really struck by that because I noticed when I was reading her poems how often the theme of music comes up. Listeners actually might have come across one of her poems. It was set to music by Arthur Sullivan. The lyrics come from a poem by Procter called A Lost Chord. Actually, I'm going to read a little bit of this and then we can listen to the music as well, and it might spark a memory for some people having heard it. Seated one day at the organ, I was weary and ill at ease, and my fingers wandered idly over the noisy keys. I do not know what I was playing or what I was dreaming then, but I struck one chord of music like the sound of a great amen.
Heaven I shall hear. chord again. It may be that only in heaven I shall hear that grand
That is a 1922 recording of The Lost Chord performed by John McCormick. If you'd like to go back and read the poem, we're putting a link into the show notes. I wonder if you have any thoughts about the reflection on some sort of consolation in the divine or the transcendent there, how that might
Yeah.
link to these musical metaphors and themes.
Yeah, there's musical metaphors and themes that come up in so much of her poetry, particularly the figure of the organ, which comes up in her long poem, Tomb of Ghent, and others as well. Thinking about that question of the transcendent, I think it's really listening out for this chord after the speaker in the poem plays it once on the organ and thinks about how hearing it this once linked all the meanings in her life together and brought her this sense of peace. She may hear it again, but she may have to wait until she reaches heaven to hear it again. And I think what the poem's doing here is emphasizing a kind of interruption of heavenly time into the time of earth. And that happens in the space of the church here, and particularly in the body of this player of the lost chord. She experiences this heavenly moment, this moment of God's coming down suddenly, and her vision of everything alters. So it's this momentary experience, this musical experience that I think could be seen as a kind of epiphany here.
Yeah, and I think the implication in the lines, I've sought but I seek it vainly, that one lost chord divine, that she's listening very closely. And I'm struck by that because I wonder how much of a sense of expectation there might be that when she also listens to those in need, that might be one of the places that she's listening to see if she can kind of hear this lost chord divine. I don't know if that matches up with your understanding of her theology or her way of thinking about her charity work or her work with those in need and how that's represented in other poems.
Yeah, that definitely matches up, Amanda. I think what's going on through so many of her poems, that where she finds the sacred, where real listening happens, is in community and is in listening to the forsaken and the lost. And she thinks what it means to embody Christ to those people. So, yeah, we find this in her long poem, A Legend of Provence.
Can you give us maybe a summary? That's a narrative poem, isn't it?
Yeah, so it's a narrative poem that was first published in 1859 in Dickens's journal All the Year Round. We've mentioned Household Words, and this was what came after it. Every year, he collected a group of stories by regular contributors to his journals, probably his most popular writers, and he'd put their stories together, and often it would be a group of people all sitting round. And in this case, where A Legend of Provence comes, they're all sitting in a haunted house. And he titles Procter's poem The Ghost in the Picture Room and offers a frame for it, which is a little bit mocking of a figure called Belinda, who's the woman he describes as telling the story about this picture. If you want to read this, you can go to Dickens Journals online, a really helpful online resource that has this. But let's get back to A Legend of Provence, or The Ghost in the Picture Room. It starts off with this restless woman looking at a picture of a medieval nun and remembering a legend that she'd once heard about a nun. And the poem is pretty much her telling the story of this legend, telling the story of Angela, who grew up by the convent and entered it at a young age when she was orphaned. She lives a really peaceful life in the convent, getting flowers together, worshipping Mary, singing, and living this ideal, peaceful life. And then war happens. And during the war, a wounded knight comes to the convent. She's able to nurse him back to health. And he tells her stories of all the battles that he's fought and exciting things he's been involved with. And she tells him of the legends of the convent and the things she'd learnt and the stories she's picked up from the other nuns. And over that time, they grow closer. Late one night, they leave the convent together.
Mm.
And shortly after, he leaves her and she becomes an outcast and a beggar. And we're told that respectable women won't speak to her. So she has this tragic turn, this tragic life, but she longs to die back in the convent, the place that she first knew. So she makes an arduous journey by foot back to the convent. She asks to be let in, and the sister goes to get a key. As she's gone, Angela has a vision. She has a vision of the Virgin Mary, who tells her that she's taken her place all of this time in the convent, and enables Angela to resume her place. And so Angela goes back into the convent. We're told that the nuns can tell that some sort of shadow has come over her, but it's kind of a little bit imperceptible, so they can't really tell what's happened. But it's not until she's on her deathbed that she tells the other nuns what's happened, that actually Mary took her place all of those years in the convent since she left.
So Mary's taken her form so that she looks like her. So it's not discovered that
Yeah.
she left. Is that okay? Yeah.
Yeah, so this real moment of radical transformation, really, that Mary's offered this. I'll just read out the section of the poem. Have we not all, amid life's petty strife, some pure ideal of a noble life that once seemed possible? Did we not hear the flutter of its wings and feel it near and just within our reach? It was, and yet we lost it in this daily jar and fret, and now live idle in a vague regret. But still our place is kept, and it will wait, ready for us to fill it soon or late. No star is ever lost, we once have seen. We always may be what we might have been, since good, though only thought, has life and breath. God's life can always be redeemed from death, and evil in its nature is decay, and any hour can blot it all away. The hopes that lost in some far distance seem, maybe the truer life, and this the dream. We always may be what we might have been, is the line I think comes out the most strongly and resonates with so many readers here. Oddly, this line has been attributed to George Eliot. I don't know if you've come across it, Amanda.
Yeah, I actually have. I think somebody gave me a bookmark actually, and it had George Eliot's name on it, which is funny.
Yeah, it's odd, isn't it? I don't think it's something
Yeah.
George Eliot would actually have said herself. She's always talking about life being rooted in one place and dealing with the errors that we make.
Yeah.
It's not like George Eliot at all, but oddly attributed to her.
I think it is such a lovely idea. It really resonates with me, that idea of our place being kept, and that there's always kind of potential and hope that we can still be what we kind of aspire to be, or what the best part of ourself is. And I think that would, to me, that kind of going back to what we were talking about just a moment ago with Procter's listening to people in need and her charity work and so on, I can imagine that that would be a sentiment that would really be powerful for people to hear, who, like Angela, have in the poem, have gone through difficult life circumstances and have been outcasts from society. And then you have this message of, there is still hope for you. You've not done too much to kind of be cast out, or whatever it might be.
Yeah, and I think that invitation to see people as they might have been, or as they might be
Yes.
differently, runs across here, which really fits in with Procter's emphasis on empathy and treating others as sacred and treating others as God sees them. I know a thinker we both talked a lot about and written about is Simone Weil, and she says in her book Gravity and Grace, I also am other than what I imagine myself to be. To know this is forgiveness. And I think these lines seem to really resonate with what Procter says in a way. Imagining yourself as other is forgiveness.
Yeah, I agree. I think, there's a definite resonance there between those ideas, and the kind of decentering of the self there, the recognition of oneself and the other. There's a kind of, I don't know if it's a sense of parallel lives, but I guess that's sort of how I imagine Procter's poem, is that there are these kind of two lives that are available to Angela. And in the Simone Weil quotation that you just read, there's also this sense of duality. I also am other than what I imagine myself to be. And the ending of the Procter poem, the sense of a kind of a dream, and that relationship between something imagined or a dream and reality, and the question about maybe what's more real, whether our perceptions of ourselves or others are accurate or realistic, or that line about good, though only thought has life and breath, God's life. It offers a little bit of a challenge to our understanding of reality and our perception of ourselves and of other people.
Yeah, definitely. I find Proctor's poems so challenging to how we live our lives, how we see other people, how we empathize. And I think the highlight for me in making this series has been the profound conversations we've had about some of Proctor's words and the challenge that they offered to early readers in thinking about those who were homeless and struggling, particularly in her
Yeah.
book, A Chaplet of Verses, but also how they challenge us today. Do you want to give us an overview of what we can expect through the rest of the podcast,
Yes.
Amanda?
Yes, it's very exciting what we have in store. So we're chatting with various experts. We're going to talk to Lisa Scholl, Alex Round, Jim Mussel, Josie Billington, and we'll also have a chance to hear from the community and events coordinator at Providence Road Charity, which is the charity that Procter was involved with and is still going today. And we'll be talking about a variety of themes with all of these experts: Procter's faith, her charity work, feminist networks, and as you were just saying, Lizzie, what she has to offer us today. So just to give you a taster about what is to come next week, here is Emma Mason sharing some insights on reading Procter and thinking about the lived experience and practice of faith.
The poems that I am most moved by are the poems to Mary. Partly, I really love the invocation of the rosary throughout the chaplet of verses, not in terms of a reference point, but more of a structure. Those poems tell us that Catholicism is a structure of feeling, a structure of living for Procter, not just something to do on a Sunday.
Thanks for listening, and do tune in next week.